There we go. Excellent. Can everybody let me know if they can see my screen?
Yep.
Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. All right. So we wanted to unpack the issue around ocean plastic products and some associated greenwashing that we have been subjected to. Tangaroa Blue Foundation is a national charity that focuses on the removal, the data recording and the prevention of marine debris and plastic pollution. And we have had a massive amount of interest and questions coming to us, not only from our AMD partners, but also from our volunteers and just the general public. So we felt that there was a real need to unpack this issue and get some truth and clarity around what's possible and what's not. And we've been really excited about the interest in this space from other partners as well. And people that have registered today are from all levels of government, from other NGOs and associations, industry associations, consumers, volunteers, and the general public. So that broad, I guess, interest is shown within the groups that would like to attend here today. So I also just want to acknowledge that the Environmental Defenders Office, and I'll introduce everybody in a moment, has been key in helping us compile this information into a way that it was able to be submitted to the ACCC, and we submitted an ACCC submission on Friday, and this is the basis of this discussion. Okay, so the question is, ocean plastic products, are they credible or just greenwashing? Can you go and pull a pile of plastics and rubbish from the ocean and make something out of it? And what does that look like? And what are the consequences? What are the benefits? And what are basically the pros and cons of this process? So I'd like to introduce our panel. So myself, as I mentioned, Heidi Tate, I'm the CEO of Tangaroa Blue Foundation. Also I'd like to introduce Kirsty Ruddock, who's the Managing Lawyer, Safe Climate from the Environmental Defenders Office. So Kirsty's there giving you a wave. We have Brett Tate on the call as well, who's been our Project Manager for Operation Clean Sweep. We have Royston Kent, the CEO of BC Plastics, who's one of our Operation Clean Sweep partners. And we have Warwick Hall, who's the Vice President of the Australasian Bioplastics Association up there as well. So a good diverse panel group as well. Now, what we're going to do is run through our what we've put into our claim, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. So please, if you'd like to keep your questions into the chat function for the moment, and then we'll go through and look at those once the presentation is done, but that way you don't forget them. If I could ask everyone just to pop yourselves on mute as well, and so that we don't get any background noise, and apologise if my little Kelpie Willow decides to put her 5 cents worth in. She's sleeping under my desk at the moment and hopefully stays there. All right, so a bit of an overview on ocean plastic, ocean-bound plastic. So over the last few years, a variety of products claiming to be made of ocean plastic, ocean-bound plastic, or potential ocean-bound plastic have started to appear on supermarket shelves and in online stores. So the messaging appears to claim that we've solved the marine plastic pollution issue, including what to do with ocean plastics once they've been recovered from the environment. But we found that misleading labelling on some of the products and marketing campaigns is causing consumer confusion. I am going to ask Kirsty if you would like just to give us an overview about the ACCC.
So hi everyone, I'm Kirsty and I'm from, as Heidi mentioned, the EDO. So we have a corporate and commercial team that works particularly on fossil fuel-based greenwashing, but with Heidi's really, excitingly taking us on the journey of, ocean plastics as now as well as part of that safe climate work that we're doing, given the linkages between plastics and climate change, if you think about it. So anyway, just to talk to you about the ACCC. The ACCC is the competition regulator and the National Consumer Law Organisation for Australia. So they are about promoting fair trading and competition, particularly. So they are responsible for the Australian Consumer Law, which has various protections in it in relation to, either misleading or deceptive conduct or false claims in relation to particular products. And the reason that we've complained to them in particular is because this particular year in 2022-23, they have a priority of looking at environmental claims and sustainability and consumer and fair trading issues around that. So they particularly had a history over the past couple of years of looking at claims around things like whether something's biodegradable, whether it's flushable, those types of themes. And so they've decided that this particular, given the growth in these claims, and particularly around net zero claims as well, that this was going to be a priority for them this year. So we thought we might as well add ocean plastics to the list of things that they're looking at. I understand a couple of months back they did an internet sweep where they kind of looked at claims that are being made. So I'm sure they've probably already seen some of them. But that was the point, is to sort of really, I guess, show them that there's sort of growth in these particular claims that are coming through. Basically, one of the reasons we've also complained to them is particular comments that they've made about the importance of, I guess, their interventions in this area. And their deputy chair has said that false or misleading sustainability claims undermine consumers in all green claims and reduces confidence in the market, something that they're keen to guard against. So if people are out there making, I guess, green claims that are without foundation or not supported by the science, which is probably the case in this case, that reduces confidence for everyone around all the claims that are being made on products and around transparency and sort of also, I guess, competition in those areas as well, because it can give some people that are using those claims an unfair advantage. So that's what we're going to talk a bit more about today. To you, Heidi.
Thanks, Kirsty. All right, so our submission to the ACCC was based on 5 main pillars, and these are the ones that we're going to unpack today. So the first one was, in the absence of a definition of ocean plastic, consumers are likely to assume that ocean plastic is actually removed from the ocean, whereas most ocean plastic is not actually removed from the ocean. So that's our first point. Our second one is around what is actually technically feasible to make out of ocean plastic from a chemistry perspective. So the impossibility of just purely using ocean plastic to create or produce another product. The third and fourth one we packed together a little bit for this submission or this presentation, in that there's no evidence that recycling plastic that's removed from the ocean actually has an environmental benefit or benefits the wildlife in any way. And just to highlight here, we're not talking about the removal, we're talking about the recycling of. And the last one is that there's no evidence that the ocean-bound plastic feedstock that's recovered would have actually ended up in the ocean in the first place. So they're our 5 main themes. So I'm going to quickly just go through each of those to unpack them a little bit. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have an opportunity for questions afterwards. So the first one is in regards to the lack of definitions. So scientific studies originally considered ocean plastic to be waste located within a certain distance of the ocean that had the potential to end up in the ocean or become ocean bound through wind or water or mismanagement. The plastics industry has accordingly defined ocean-bound plastic as any plastic located within 50 kilometres from shores, where waste management is inefficient and therefore it could end up in the ocean. There is no government accepted definition of ocean plastic or ocean-bound plastic. And as such, we would argue that ocean-bound plastic would be better defined and more accurately defined as post-consumer plastic waste, because that's the majority of what it is. This is from the Ocean-Bound Plastics Certification Documentation, which showcases that distance metric. So 50 kilometres from a beach inland could be defined as ocean-bound plastic for that particular feedstock. And if we put that into some kind of representation in an Australian setting, let's stand on Sydney Harbour Bridge and figure out how far 50 kilometres is from there, and we'd be out near Penrith somewhere. Now, I'm not sure if the people of Penrith would consider themselves connected that strongly to the ocean, but in this definition, they would be removing litter from their environment, and potentially it could be used as ocean-bound plastic. If we do a quick trip down to Melbourne and we stand on St Kilda Beach, we're looking at somewhere up near Mount Macedon, which would be the same kind of distance away from the shoreline that could be claimed as ocean-bound plastic. So there is our first misleading claim or something that we think that consumers wouldn't really know or understand when they looked at a product claiming to be made of ocean-bound plastic. So if we look then at a bit more as to where this stuff is coming from, very little ocean plastic is collected and repurposed and recycled in Australia. Most of it is sourced from countries in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia or Malaysia, where there is very little regulation around this kind of industry. So there is considerable uncertainty around what constitutes ocean plastic, with the industry definition far broader than likely to be understood by most consumers, and especially when you look at the packaging and the claims on the packaging. Furthermore, there's also uncertainty as to the quantity of ocean plastics found in those products. And there are examples that have come up over the last year or so where products such as Kevin Murphy hair products and ZeroCo have issued statements confirming that they don't know what percentage of ocean plastic was in some of their products that they had previously claimed were made out of 100% ocean plastic. And in some cases, they've admitted that it could be less than 3%. So there is misleading information out there from existing companies and products. Now, the result is that there's a real possibility that consumers of products which claim to be made of ocean plastic and 50 or 100% ocean plastic have been misled about the constitution of that product because of this lack of regulation. This is a very, very recent example. So this is from an Australian feedstock or company called oceanboundplastic.com.au, and it's part of their ocean-bound plastic range of crates. Now, these crates were being stocked in Bunnings, and the photo in the middle there is actually of my hand holding the product at my local Bunnings store. Now, you can see clearly from the marketing and the labelling, they have connected ocean-bound plastic with a material that is connected to turtles eating plastic in the environment. So anybody standing in front of that product would have a clear indication from the pictures and the branding of what buying this product should be able to achieve. However, when we brought this complaint to the Bunnings Sustainability Manager, they have done an internal deep dive and due diligence dive into this particular product, and it was recently, in the last couple of weeks, removed from the product lines of Bunnings and from the stores. And they explained to us that this was done because they had concerns that it wouldn't allow the consumer to make an informed purchasing decision based on the messaging on the label. So, you know, Tangaroa Blue can say whatever we think about this, but we're looking at some major Australian chains that haven't been able to be satisfied during their own due diligence deep dives about the supply chain claiming to be coming from ocean plastic or ocean-bound plastic. Okay, point number 2 was around the chemistry and what's actually possible. So ocean plastic products can't be produced out of 100% or purely 100% ocean plastic for a number of reasons. So when plastics are in the ocean, they get damaged, they get degraded, they have abrasions, they have UV, they have salt, all of these things that impact the integrity of the plastic polymers. And quite often they're breaking up into microplastics, and the majority of plastics in our ocean is microplastic. So very difficult to recover in any kind of volume as well. Now, because plastics do not biodegrade, they remain in the environment, and during these different stages of their life cycle, they have the potential for chemicals to absorb onto their surface areas and also leach out of the plastics as well, even if it has been collected later on. So old and degraded plastic is particularly susceptible to leaching and has surface area for chemicals to cling onto. And banned chemicals which are known to be toxic, like pesticide DDT, have been found on marine plastic and in sensitive ecosystems, including Sydney Harbour and Port Phillip Bay. So we're thinking about now taking plastics out of the ocean that potentially have chemicals and sometimes nasty chemicals attached to them that now we want to make something out of as well. So if we continue on that theme, let's look at one type of plastic product that's being claimed to be made out of ocean plastic, which is a food packaging product. Remembering what we just talked about, chemicals. So most manufacturers follow the US Food and Drug Administration standards, which provide guidelines about the use of recycled plastics to avoid packaging being contaminated, although they haven't specifically looked at ocean plastics yet. As there are strict rules in relation to contamination, even from food, it would be difficult for ocean plastic to meet the criteria needed for reuse in food-grade plastic. So the process of recycling itself often requires the addition of virgin plastic resin or other additives to any recycled product to ensure that it's sufficiently durable for use in food and other packaging. And often virgin plastic will be required as an inner layer designed to prevent interaction with the recycled product to meet various food standards. Now, this particular product of Moo yogurt is something that a photo that I took at my local Woolies store. So this is a product claiming, you can see in the picture there, to be 100% ocean plastic recycled tubs. So the question is in relation to what kind of contamination or cleaning processes would have needed to have undergone for that to actually be feasible. Claims 3 and 4, as I said, I packed together. And they're about what kind of evidence is there that actually recycling ocean-bound plastic has any kind of benefit to the environment or wildlife. So it's estimated that there's around 14 million tonnes of plastic entering the oceans every year. And at the current rate of production, we're looking at an increase in up to about 29 million tonnes by 2040. Cleanup activities temporarily reduce the risk that plastic pollution poses to our wildlife and our environment when it's removed in a local setting. Recycling activities reduce the impact of producing virgin plastic and diverts waste from landfill. There is no evidence of any additional environmental benefits by recycling ocean-bound plastic compared to recycling post-consumer waste. And this is the connection that we're finding misleading by saying recycling ocean-bound plastic improves the environmental condition or has benefit to wildlife. The required solutions include a dramatic reduction in plastic production. That's what's going to help our marine environment and our wildlife. And the use of plastics by avoiding our throwaway culture, as well as supporting local and credible reuse and refill systems. This is an example of an aluminium can from a new brand that comes up that says this can removes 2 bottles of plastic from our oceans. Very hard to substantiate a claim like that. Also, many companies are using packaging and marketing campaigns using iconic images of turtles and waves and beautiful oceans and sunsets and jumping dolphins to try and, highlight their environmental credentials. As such, encouraging consumers to use more plastic by buying ocean plastic products will not improve the amount of plastics in our ocean. In fact, it rather adds to the problem. So considering the above, there is a strong likelihood that the representations that give the overall impression that products made from ocean plastic improve the marine environment will mislead the average consumer of those products. And this will be in particular in cases where there's just a one-line headline or a brief grab, as opposed to deep dive due diligence research. So the removal of ocean plastic during cleanup programs is insufficient to address the scale of plastic pollution issue. We need to reduce our production if we're going to do that. And our 5th claim is that there is no evidence that ocean-bound plastic items that have been removed would have actually ever ended up in the ocean in the first place. So in many cases, waste pickers are removing plastic from the environment in Southeast Asia. It's then processed in non-regulated plastic factories and then shipped to Australia. So basically, we're importing waste from another country. In the absence of trackability of where the plastic was removed from the environment, in what working conditions it was processed in, including youth labour and OH&S risks, how it was transported from and to and where it was manufactured, there's no evidence that this process improves the marine environment compared to using virgin feedstock or other type of recycled content that it's not ocean-bound or ocean-bound plastic. Some companies are also going further and citing carbon benefits as well by using ocean-bound plastic. And this is a screen grab from the Ocean-Bound Plastic website that says products made from ocean-bound plastic use less energy to produce. So I'm not sure how that claim could also be substantiated. And that they reduce pollution in the ocean and they're as tough as virgin products as well. So, that's opening another can of worms. Sorry, Kirsty. Okay, so I'm going to ask Kirsty to talk about the harm around this kind of behaviour. And before I hand over to her, I just wanted to give this other example. So this is Herbal Essences See the Change, another Australian product. And we know, most of us know about the issues around the TerraCycle claims that were brought up internationally this year as well. Well, you can see on the back of this particular product, that we had an initial branding that claimed this product was made out of 25% beach plastic. And what we've done is just seen that they've put a sticker over the top of it, actually saying that there is no claim of percentage for this particular product, but we're still going to stick it out there in the market. So Kirsty, can I ask you to talk about the harm associated with this kind of conduct?
Yes, sure, Heidi. Thanks. Well, this is obviously what I was sort of alluding to before as to why the ACCC is concerned around this particular conduct in the first place. Obviously, when you see these claims, and I've done it myself, you go, wow, okay, I could be helping with this problem. And people, you know, when you're buying a product on a shelf, you're not spending obviously a lot of time reading the label. You can see something that might be a headline claim on it around, you know, benefiting the ocean, a turtle or other thing. And you go, oh, okay, well, I'll buy that brand instead of, you know, the brand that you might normally buy because you want to do the right thing. So they're taking advantage, I guess, of that community awareness about the difficulties with, well, I guess, the issues around ocean pollution, and looking at that to try and create a consciousness around why you should buy a product that might help to deal with that particular problem. This has disadvantaged companies who are not using these types of claims, because often the companies that are selling these products are also charging a premium for it, and charging a higher fee. And so you may end up paying more. Thinking you might be prepared to pay more because you're prepared to invest in a product that is doing the right thing. But if that is actually not happening, then obviously there's a detriment to not only consumers but to the market more generally. So we're trying to highlight to the ACCC when we bring this complaint, what is the harm associated with this particular conduct, so that they can understand there is harm, because obviously they're more likely to act as a national regulator if they think there's harm going on through these claims.
Thanks, Kirsty. And before we go into the Q&A session, we also just wanted to provide people with an understanding of how to do a ACCC submission themselves. So I might ask you to walk through that one as well for me, Kirsty.
Sure. So obviously it's pretty easy to make a complaint to the ACCC, and there's a portal on their website that you can go to. I've put the link, well, I think I just put the link there about where you can make a complaint. It literally just takes you through. You can just add details of where you saw the product, all of the information around it, why you're concerned around it. So generally the kind of things that we suggest when you're making that complaint to highlight to them so that they take that complaint seriously. And this doesn't just apply to ocean plastic, but anytime you see an environmental claim that you might be concerned about. But, you know, obviously we're focused particularly here on the ocean plastic claims, given their growth and what we've been seeing. Even when we've been writing this complaint, we found about 5 more products. And so you can just see that, you know, it is the latest sort of marketing claim that's sort of doing the rounds. So we would say, well, what is the particular claim that you're worried about? Take a picture. You know, send them the picture like that, you know, Heidi's done in the supermarket of the labels that we've seen, and they can then understand what is the particular representation that you're concerned. You know, what is it in particular around that? Is it the use of the turtle? Is it the use of the term ocean bound? What is it that you think is the representation you're concerned about? And then you might want to highlight to the ACCC what section of the Australian Consumer Law you think has been breached. Section 18 is the normal one, which is misleading or deceptive conduct, which claims anything that's, you know, misleading. Or there can be false claims around the standard quality or composition of a good, which can also apply to sort of recycled products as well in section 29. So they're the ones that we usually suggest. And then you can explain, like we've taken you through today, why you think it is misleading. So what are the reasons you think that claim is wrong? And then what is the harm associated to it? So did the product you see cost more? Did it, are you seeing people buying more of that particular product because of that claim as well? So what do you think are the harms associated with it that you might want to highlight to them? So those are really the quick things that you just need to think about when you're making a complaint. And yeah, as I said, it's really important to make these complaints because the ACCC do look at the types of complaints they're getting in and look at the trends that they're seeing emerging. So, you know, they're more likely to act when they see complaints coming through as well.
Thanks, Kirsty. I'm going to open up for some questions now from, and that they can be either directed more generally or to one of our panelists. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So if anybody has a specific question that they would like to pop into the chat or raise their hand, we can start off having a bit more of a discussion around some of those main points. Do you have anybody that wants to jump in? All right, so we have a question that says from Nathan, is there a type of packaging such as refills that could claim to reduce ocean-bound plastic? So I'm wondering whether, well, Brett, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Yeah, look, is there a type of packaging that could claim to reduce ocean-bound plastic? A refill situation obviously does. If you're using something that's going to refill and replace that product, then there's definitely the opportunity to see less entry points for that product to enter into the environment. So there is an opportunity with refilling. Refilling is obviously, the best option locally. There are other ways of refilling and sending things through posts and things like that, which it is not best practice for realistically anything except using up energy. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Brett. Royston or Warwick, did you want to add anything to Brett's comments?
No, I think Brett's it's covered pretty well. I reduce, reuse, recycle, sort of the dogma that we're working to these days, and that's the way. If you've got a reusable container, then it's less likely to end up in the litter stream.
For sure.
Yeah, I think the only point I'd add to that as well, it starts back in the original design of the product. So many things are designed as single use. If we're designing it for multiple uses, then potentially we're designing it for refill as well. Just something as simple as that.
Yep. Design's everything.
Thanks, guys. So we have another question, one from Dallas. Is there any customers that you recommend or are legitimate in their claims? And further to that, for a company, how can they access any legitimate material that's ocean waste material?
Look for companies that are working best practice today. Ocean-bound plastic is post-consumer waste. We've got to get that language right. So in Australia, we have some amazing companies that are doing their best practice today. They're part of programs like Operation Clean Sweep that are able to define what they're doing and really put out some confidence in the community. We won't go into naming them, but certainly if you look into and do some deep dive into it, look for the great quality recycling products that are coming out of Australia. These sort of imports that we're seeing at the moment take away from our Australian investment into recycling and takes away incredible innovation that could be happening, and just it puts everything at stalemate. So that's sort of what I would end on that one.
Thanks, Brett. I would just add one thing on that is that we want, part of this session is about getting people to ask questions and not just looking at a beautiful photo of jumping dolphins and think, oh my God, someone else has solved this, but really thinking about what's feasible and possible and what the pros and cons are before you purchase something. And importing has a carbon footprint. We can't export waste. We're trying to figure out how to deal with our own waste. So we should be investing in that and not necessarily importing from a third world country to make more stuff here. Royston, did you want
finish
to?
with Dallas? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
With how can you access legitimate actual ocean waste? Go to the beach and pick it up. We do, and we're working out how to deal with it. So in terms of legitimate ocean waste material and things like that, I'm going to say that there really isn't. A lot of larger organisations out there that are stockpiling it and using it. We are one of those organisations working with the plastics industry to work out what to do with our plastics, how we deal with the contamination. We're into this project now 4 years. So, there isn't legitimate ocean waste as such that's on the market today. We will in the future hopefully see some of the bigger organisations that are doing their cleanups and doing big removal events, having an avenue to put them into a material or into a purpose that maybe, and again, the goal being putting it into some sort of circular outcome. I'll let someone else answer the next one.
Actually, I was just going to invite Rebecca. She's had her hand up. Rebecca, did you want to ask a question?
Thanks, Heidi. That was and everyone, that was really informative, and we're going to strike anyone with claims for ocean-bound plastic on our potential sponsors list. I think one of the ironic things is probably every major waste facility in Australia could then be classed as processing ocean-bound plastics under that definition. I think what I would like to see is much more, to see a mechanism that gives consumers confidence on this packaging, which is, like the composting standard, but a standard around recycled content and reuse as well, because we're seeing this greenwashing around a whole range of other items as well. So I wondered if there's any opportunity from this to start a focus on other items that are claiming to be more sustainable or eco-friendly, like the alternatives to single-use coffee cups, etc., and whether it can go beyond the plastic, go beyond the ocean-bound plastics. And the other thing that I wanted to say that I think that we need to be aware of is we do have sources of good quality recycled plastics in Australia. And I know for disclosure, on the board of Container Deposit Scheme in WA, and the PET and the HDPE that's coming out of that is food grade, but that the market has fallen out of that for that recycled plastic since our plastic waste export bans. We're still selling it and there's a market, but it's still cheaper. I would say that's more expensive for these brands to be using that than to be either buying virgin plastics or importing this plastic. So I feel like there's an important need for better labeling and better consumer awareness around this, and calling out the greenwashing as well. So we're really supportive of all these efforts.
Thanks, Rebecca. I got a question here from Keegan. What are the realistic expectations of percentage of ocean-bound plastic in recycled materials? That's a great question. Royston, did you want to have a stab at that, or Warwick or Brett? I'm sure all three of you guys have a thought on this.
I'll just jump in. There is the expectations of percentage of ocean-bound plastic. It's post-consumer waste. So if you're going to do it based on post-consumer waste, which is what it is, it's collected through a recycling system, then you can do it. There is no ocean-bound. So that's number one. What are the percentages of using actual ocean waste that's found on beaches that's contaminated? That's a really big chemistry issue that everyone in the world is struggling to deal with. And if you look at some of the products that are out there currently at the moment that are promoting some of this stuff, they're down to about 3%. So we've number one, ocean-bound plastic is post-consumer waste.
Thanks, Brett. Warwick, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think Rebecca's made a very good point, and many of us in the industry that there are these claims that are made without any substantiation, and the only way to address it is to have standards and test methods that you can prove what the origins of the product, prove that it's got an ocean plastics content. It's got a recycled content and what that is. And we've just got to collectively, you can take a proposal to Standards Australia if there's enough interest to develop an Australian standard to address these issues. But at the moment, I'm not aware of any. So as Brett said, you just got to take pot luck. You don't know. I can claim 1% ocean plastics or 50% ocean plastics, and I've got no way of proving it. You've got no way of disproving it. So it gets down to who do you believe? We need standards.
Thanks, Warwick. Royston, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, geez, it's a can of worms, I think. To Brett's point as well. So ocean-bound plastic, which is post-consumer waste. There are so many different levels of post-consumer waste. One of the issues with recycling plastic is most people think there's only 6 plastics, but there's tens of thousands of different polymers that contaminate and cross-contaminate each other all the time. There are certainly some people out there doing genuine recycling. And there's certainly people that are trying to do the best as well, but they need a hand as well to verify and track and trace and be able to educate themselves as well as educate the consumer and the general public. I think one of the questions that we have to ask as well is, and Brett alluded to it as well, it's like if we're going to recycle a particular material source, we need to close the loop on one source of polymer. And then once we've closed the loop on that one source of material, what are we going to recycle with it? So if we start thinking again with the end in mind, ultimately, yes, we've got all this waste stream. We know designing the product at the beginning is going to help. But while we've got all this waste stream, what are we designing the next product for with this waste stream? So because we've seen plenty of people recycling or collecting with very little recycling. It's that circular part. It's that product that's manufactured at the end, which is critical. And all polymers have been designed for product specific or industry specific. So you can't just take one polymer and add it to a certain product. So it's a really complex question.
Thanks, Royston. We're hoping that this session is the first of opening up more discussion on this issue, because there are a lot of questions and a lot of unpacking. We've got a question here from Hugh. So is there an opportunity to define a true definition in working with major industry bodies such as the ACCC, APCO, AIP? Are there likely to be a collaboration on this? And is there something that ANZPAC should consider as a concern that they need to address? I would say it's critical that everybody is on the same page with this. And there are a number of platforms that exist currently that are looking at labelling, recycling targets, content, and of course, all leading not only for working with local council levels, but feeding into the International Plastics Treaty as well. If we're not all talking about the same thing, that will just open more and more confusion. That's my point. Kirsty, is that something that you wanted to touch on maybe as well?
Yeah, look, I'm just opening up the ACCC has a green marketing and the Australian Consumer Law Guide. It's fairly out of date. It's sort of, I think, dated 2011 and talks about, recyclable and what that means. And it sort of says, when making a claim about that your product contains recycled material, consumers may take this to mean that the product has been through a previous life cycle or has been recycled by another consumer. If, however, the material has been recovered from waste stream during manufacture and reuse, this should be made clear by using words such as material reclaimed from manufacturing. So they're clearly alluding to some of this, but I think it'd be really important to sort of probably start to work with their compliance area, and they do have a compliance area that's looking at these types of guides as to how we might update it to deal with some of the current trends that we're seeing. We have been asking for that in a couple of complaints that we've lodged with them as well, particularly around carbon neutral, zero, net zero claims and, having more definitions and guidance to people. So I think, yeah, that's certainly something that you could take up with them. Whether they would collaborate, they would probably tend to work on this guide as the way that they do it. But yeah, I would certainly be reaching out to them and seeing if it's something that, they would be prepared to work with you on.
Thanks, Kirsty. And that's something that we did include in our submission as well, was that, that this issue is an emerging issue, and, guides like this, it's critical that they keep up to date as new technologies put new products on the table. Karen, I can see your hand up. Would you like to ask a question? Oh, you're on mute.
Yep. It's about the ACCC. I've put complaints before about the biodegradability of balloons, and it comes back and says that the ACCC will not let you know what the outcome of the complaint is. I know Qualitex has taken off their website, but people who buy balloons. So it'd be good if there was some way of the information filtering down to all the producers, and also knowing which ones have been contacted by the ACCC to make sure that their information is correct. Sort of a public acknowledgement of what's going on, rather than wondering if they have been contacted.
I guess in this kind of setting, you know, for us, it was Bunnings took the product line off the shelves. So one day it was there and the next day it wasn't. So for us, you know, that wasn't as a result of the ACCC submission, but it was as a result of us talking with their sustainability team about our concerns. And so I think we just got to keep an eye on what's on the shelf. And it's good to see when some of these things change in not only their marketing, but their availability to consumers as well. Kirsty, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the ACCC will publicise when they take enforcement action, but they won't necessarily tell you when they haven't done that. So if someone, you know, if they've actually resolved the issue and someone said, oh, I won't actually use that term anymore, they won't necessarily publicise that unless they've given a formal undertaking to them. So yeah, it is a bit hit and miss, unfortunately, but I mean, they do suggest on their website, as Heidi has said, that you take these issues straight with the suppliers, and that is often a good way of doing it as well, to sort of make sure that you get an answer from them as well.
It puts a lot onto the consumers to find.
It does, unfortunately, yeah.
For me to go through every single balloon supplier in Australia, it'd take years, and some of them are just really small businesses. Then they might, you know, have the occasional Facebook post. So it's almost impossible to keep up with some of the claims by the producers.
Are you dropping out a little bit there, Karen?
So it'd just be good if there was legislation to cover the whole thing.
And I guess that was the point of the submission, was we gave examples, but with an explanation that this is much broader and an emerging issue that they'll see more of. Jenny Lee, I can see that you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question? I'm not sure if you're still on mute. We might come back to Jenny Lee. I'm not sure whether she's having audio issues or not. We have another question on the chat. So what is the group's thought on the return to sender concept for manufacturers to have governance of being responsible for their products' waste? Oh, Brett, I could see that you're jumping at this one.
Localize. Look, what are you buying? What are you buying that's that good to be refilled in a factory, to be sent back to you, to be emptied, to be refilled and sent back again? You know, you can buy that product in your local environment, your local organic store, where you can, look and search for the alternatives. If you're living remote, hey, you know what? That's what you do. You're doing it, but you're buying it in bulk. You're not buying it in small amounts. So, yeah, I mean, it's another level of waste transport that shouldn't be done, from my side.
Well, there's always going to be a carbon impact of transportation, isn't there? So what we've talked about with food miles, we talk about product miles. The more that you don't have to transport stuff around, the better. Royston, did I see you wanting to comment on that?
Sorry, Dallas has asked more for the manufacturers to own their circular. Dallas, definitely, I think in sending your waste back to them, I mean, it's got to be done in a very holistic way. Individual items, big, large collection, industry, working with industry to create recovery of circular polymer materials that have got value. There's huge amounts of opportunity in that space to do that type of recovery. And sending materials around. I mean, we've got to broaden our horizon in terms of what we're doing as well, and that is how we move material around the place and where it can be manufactured and where it can be processed. There's a whole new future for how we look at waste in terms of a localized effort and a localized investment into waste inputs. But there's another big discussion, as we know, Dallas. So thank you for the question.
Thanks, Brett. Royston?
I'm just going to just touch on the point again. I think if if we're talking about some of the large brands and their products, I think absolutely whether the product's sent back for recycling or whether it's taken into a drop-off point, a little bit like containers for change, but I don't know, it's a difficult model potentially to put together, but it asks the question again, it puts the emphasis immediately back on the big brand to go, when it comes back to me, what are we going to do with it? And so if we have to recycle, and we're going to have to recycle for a number of years until we potentially get the refilling options more up and running, which seems to be a secondary process or a secondary stage, when you have a look at what's happening with like Coke bottles and things like that, they're starting to move to that now. So not just recycling the PET, but now they're going, okay, well, let's set up these wash plants to do the cleaning so we can actually refill. So I think, again, the question is always going to keep coming back to that circular product. If we are going to recycle, why, to what end, what are we going to create? But absolutely, I think we should capture it.
And capture it into industry, and Royston works with some very big companies out there that are doing these circular recovery programs, and certainly for our foundation, we're embarking on some pretty amazing recovery options out there across industry and then across retail. So yeah, it's a great opportunity.
Thanks, Brett. I'm going to go back. I can see Jenny Lee's hand still up. Jenny Lee, did you have a question? Okay. Jump in on the chat if you are having audio problems there. I will actually just throw one little comment on the back of that, and because it's topical at the moment, obviously around the collapse around REDcycle and the uproar around the impact of that in the recycling setting. And something that both Brett and Royston touched on is about what are we making out of it to ensure that it doesn't create more harm to the environment in the process or at the end of its next life. And we look at soft plastic recycling, and in some cases being made into things like outdoor furniture that then goes and sits in the sun and gets attacked by UV and changes in temperature that then release microplastics, get faded, look ugly, get pulled out by the council. And I haven't heard of an example, and I'd love to be proved wrong, but I haven't heard of an example of those furnitures then being sent back to the manufacturer, and in a lot of cases that's in Victoria, but then ends up in landfill themselves. And that's not, I think, what, again, the public consumer kind of thinks it happens when they go and put their soft plastic into the REDcycle bin in the supermarket. For us, we consider that a not fit for purpose recycling solution or a non-solution. We're kind of glad it got collapsed, so we hope that a more fit for purpose option could be looked at. But if you think about what happens to a chip packet, if you put that in the sun, it degrades. Just because you crush 1 million of them together and make a chair out of it and stick that in the sun, there's not going to be any other outcome than that in the long term. We've got a question. Oh, yes.
Sorry, Heidi. Just to comment, downcycling. When it's taken to a piece of furniture that's going to deteriorate eventually, that's not recycling, it's downcycling. It's another disposal option.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Warwick, and that's a very, very good point. We've got a question here from Nathan. Is there an opportunity for NGO to create a recycled content standard and accreditation process, as an example the Marine Stewardship Council has done with seafood? Who wants to dive into that one?
I can dive into that one a little bit, because I've been involved in creating the standards for compostable plastics, and both the commercial and home composting, and it's a process that takes some time, but it's possible, and you've just got to take the concept to Standards Australia and get enough support to form a working group and come up with the requirements that what you're trying to achieve, and what sort of test methods are available to test to verify the properties and so on. It's possible. It's just a matter of will and enough people to get involved to get on with it.
Thanks, Warwick. I would say whose responsibility is that, and whether the plethora of industry bodies that currently exist is an opportunity for them to take something like that under their wing as well, with some stringent guidance and guidelines and definitions that I think need to be nutted out to start with.
And we can, sorry, I'm just going to say, we can go a little bit further on that in terms of standards and things like that. We need a standard for recyclability, and we do plastic audits in the industry, and we've just come out of one of the fishing industry. And I'll give you an example. We're setting up a recovery of clean plastic polymers to create a circular economy in the fishing industry. Now, we've got fishing line coming in all forms of different sizes and shapes and everything wonderful, which is the end product. But within the single-use packaging of a spool that holds the line, there's 5 different types of plastic spools. Now, as an industry, they've just created themselves a huge rock because I can't recycle them, I can't collect all of them, they've got to be ended up disposed. So the cost then becomes enormous to separate. So now we've kept ourselves out of the market. So in terms of standards, we want to have a recyclability standard. We want to see that industry can get rid of the number 5, and all of a sudden it's gone down to number 4 and number 3. It's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars to recover. But if they move to 2, then they're part of a system that's a recoverable and achievable outcome for the economy and triple bottom line. So, that's the standard that needs to be followed throughout industry, is get together, work together, and there's some great opportunities in the future for industry to do that. So that's sort of, in terms of a standard, that's my opinion piece.
Thanks, Brett. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists if there was anything else that they would just like to add to the discussion that hasn't been brought up yet, and then we'll do a wrap up. So I might start with you, Kirsty. Is there anything else that you might want to just add to this discussion?
No, I don't think there's much more I can add. Just keep your lookout, and if you see greenwashing, we are here to help as well. If you do see any and want to think about further why that might be misleading and help with complaints.
Thank you. And I want to just give a massive thank you to Kirsty and the Environmental Defenders Office for helping us, pull together, and Claire up there as well, pulling together this submission. It was something that we wanted to get done, and we really, this made it a much more streamlined process and made sure that we ticked all the boxes and included everything that we needed to make it as strong as possible. So a massive thank you for all the work that you've done in the lead up to Crazy Christmas. Royston, anything you want to throw into the mix that we haven't already discussed?
No, not really. I just think everything has to be focused on that circular end. If we're manufacturing a product, we're manufacturing with an end in mind. It's not necessarily disposable, where we can make it a non-disposable, multiple use. The last several decades, manufacturers are trying to manufacture the cheapest product possible, which basically means it's a throwaway item. And obviously that's across all industries potentially as well. I think the only other thing I'd love to touch on quickly would just be that there are a lot of people out there that are flaunting the regulations. And they're absolutely flaunting, but there's also people out there that are genuinely trying to do the right thing. And we want to make sure, I think the people that are trying to do the right thing come on board, and we help to educate them, and because they're going to be massive advocates for this journey as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Royston. Brett, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
No, look, from consumer level to someone in design, I mean, it's asking the questions, and that's how all this started 4 years ago, was asking the questions, seeing a very misleading claim, and we've been very lucky to be able to deep dive into this, and it's taken us around the world, to the Netherlands, to Malaysia, to Indonesia, to Germany, to all of these areas around the world that are marketing and branding these things, and the connection that we've found is to global, greenwashing. Australia's been a target of it, and ask the question, if it's not coming from Australia, where's it coming from? You don't want to be in a position you're creating localized harm in a community elsewhere, because elsewhere is, we want to make it better as well. So ask the questions, look what's been done. If you really want to know about recycling, deep dive into Australian recycling. Look at companies like BC Plastics, and there's so many amazing companies out there doing good and doing some amazing things without our support, and it's not going to work. So we want to be able to see that happen. So that's my takeaway.
Thanks, Brett. Warwick.
No, I don't have anything to add. I think it's pretty well covered. Things only to comment on and what Brett said a little earlier about the fishing reels. I mean, there is a precedent in the automotive industry where interior plastics there's been a conscious effort to make everything as much as possible from polypropylene, so that so it can be recycled. Whereas we had ABS and polystyrene and nylons and so on, as much as possible we're using polypropylene, and that's the sort of initiative that could work.
Thanks, Warwick. Well, I can't believe this, but I've got us right on time to wrap this up. I just want to say thank you so much for everyone joining in. I know it's at a really crazy time of the year for everyone to find an hour to listen, but we really want this awareness to get out there, and people to, as Brett said, make sure you ask questions. That's the thing that we educate ourselves, then we can all make informed decisions, whether it's what we're buying for our own fridges and households, or whether it's what we're procuring for our industry or for our government departments. Just because something sounds like it's awesome and amazing, we have due diligence that we need to do to make sure that we are understanding everything that's been out there, and we're not being misled or greenwashed. So I hope that everyone found this super informative. Absolutely happy to have extra questions that you might think of sent by email afterwards to me, and we can always reach out to the experts if I'm unable to answer them. But thanks so much for your time. Wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to seeing you in 2023. So thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. That was great.